Damn it, Graves, what the hell were you thinking? You exorcised a poltergeist in the middle of a Chuck E. Cheese birthday party.
Kids gotta learn sometime, Captain.
That wasn't a demon, it was a teenager in a mouse suit.
I thought I smelled a rat.
According to the report, you performed a full exorcism using a kazoo, a bottle of Dijon, and, let me see here, a Star Trek lunchbox?
The kazoo was for focus. The Dijon was for bait. Lunchbox was for containment. And it was a Starfleet limited edition box, by the way. Show some damn respect.
Graves, you're a walking HR violation. You cursed the coffee machine last week.
It kept giving me decaf. That wasn't coffee, that was an affront to God.
You have 37 active lawsuits against you, 3 of them from actual ghosts.
Tell him to take it up with my lawyer. He knows how to get a restless spirit to settle. Out of court.
You interrogated a vampire suspect in broad daylight.
Didn't hear him complain.
You threw a Molotov cocktail into a portal and yelled, "Yippee-ki-yay, Baphomet!"
And yet, no more portal, no more Baphomet. You're welcome.
Sorry to interrupt, Chief, but we just got a call. There's a haunted bounce house in a Chili's parking lot. It's, escalating.
Thanks, kid. Now get me a coffee and make it decaf.
You bastard.
I should have gone to grade school.
You're reckless, insubordinate, and you keep parking in the chief medical examiner's spot. But damn it, Graves, you're the best we've got.
I'll get my coat. I'm headed to Chili's. I've got a house to debounce.
You better stay out of trouble, Graves.
Doubt it, Chief. It's half off appetizers after 9.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Gage Hurley.
And you have the right to remain silent as you listen to the Creep Street Podcast. Oh, that's right. Ooh, we're going to have you pleading the 5th by the time this one's done, folks. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, my God. We are breaking the laws of the ley lines. We're getting a misdemeanor in murder.
Which, wow. I mean, that's a pretty light charge.
Pretty light. Pretty light, yes. We're getting indicted for ick tonight. That's right, folks. Today we're talking about cops and the paranormal. Ooh, that's right. Put your hands in those cuffs and put them behind your backs, folks. Because my source tonight is Real Police Ghost Stories by Zachary Knowles. I mean, the title kind of says it all. And this is definitely an episode where we'll be able to do, in the future, do a Cops in the Paranormal 2. I mean,
sure.
It's just endless. It's endless. And even I recorded for our $5 and up Patreon folks. There's an episode up covering some of these tales that are just... God, they're freaky, and we're gonna buckle right up because we are gonna kick it off. We have 3 stories tonight. 3 stories to creep you the hell out, and we're starting off with Christmas Evil. Well, on a night so cold, the city was locked in an icy grip. Thick frost painted the ground and the air hung heavy with threat of snow. Now normally, a night like that means quiet streets. Who wants to be out in that shit? Nobody. Not even the town's troublemakers want to be out on a night like this freezing their buns off. So when the dispatcher's phone shattered the silence at 3 a.m., the lady working the phones that night, she was probably expecting a false alarm or even a lonely drunk. But what she got instead was a sound that would rattle even the most seasoned of 911 operators. A man on the other end of the line, absolutely frantic, and barely coherent with sheer terror. When she finally managed to get him to spit it out, one phrase cut through the static, chilling her to her bones. "My sister's possessed. She tried to cut my heart out while I slept." Now, this poor guy, clearly scared out of his wits, managed to fight her off, he said. And then he bolted for the nearest sanctuary, which happened to be the bathroom, and he locked himself inside. Picture it. He's sitting there, probably huddled in the corner, heart pounding against his ribs, terrified of what's lurking just outside that door. The dispatcher, to her credit, didn't waste a second. She immediately got some officers en route to address the situation, and she patched them through directly to the frantic caller. The lead officer on the line wasn't one for games. He was a no-nonsense type of chap. The kind who's seen every flavor of late-night delusion and shenanigans, and he certainly didn't have time for any hoax calls. He got right down to business, trying to cut through the panic and figure out what in the blazes was actually going on over there. The man, frantic, told him, "There's a demon in my sister's body." "I'm sorry, sir, what?" the officer pressed, pretty sure he hadn't heard the man correctly. "A demon that has been battling me for days," the man reiterated, his voice a strained breath. "It got free from the chains." As the man spoke, the officer on the line didn't just hear the real fear in the man's voice, he could also hear the chilling and undeniable proof of what the man was telling him. Through the phone, clear as a bell, came the sound of something scratching and banging violently at the bathroom door, wild and animalistic. In the official report later, the officer admitted what happened next was enough to rattle him to his core, because he could hear something else as well. He overheard another voice, loud and guttural, an unholy rasping sound that he later described as sounding as if someone was, quote, swallowing razor blades. This voice was taunting the caller, speaking in a language the officer didn't even understand, but its sheer malevolence was unmistakable, even through the phone. So think about that real quick. Not only can he hear this frantic caller, he can actually hear through the phone the other voice, the scratching, the banging. So he knows that, like, at least the guy calling doesn't think it's a joke if it is a hoax of some kind, if he's getting pranked. I mean, the guy is clearly in a state of terror, and they can hear directly what he is calling about. I mean, they know they're walking into something that is probably unlike anything they've ever seen. This sound, this voice that he could hear was so deep and resonant that the officer in his report says he could actually hear it once again through the phone. This voice so deep and resonant, it was actually rattling objects in the caller's bathroom. Whatever words it uttered, they filled him with a profound sense of dread, a primal fear that transcended the barrier of language. He did not need to know what was being said to know that it wasn't sweet nothings being whispered in his ear. The officer, now fully aware that this was not just some late-night delusion, he stayed on the line as he and his fellow officers arrived at the address. And yeah, no time for knocking politely on this freezing night. They went straight to work, breaching the front door with a swift, decisive move. What they found inside was something that would haunt their sleep for years to come. Standing right there, blocking the bathroom door, was a young woman. She was thin, gaunt even, her frame a testament to something deeply wrong. You just looked at her and you could tell something was wrong. It was like a rabid animal, like something wearing the costume of a human. Her terrified brother told them that she'd been, quote, broken free from her chains, he had not been exaggerating. This wasn't a metaphor. There she stood, a chilling tableau of agony and terror. A thick chain, heavy and dark, was still attached to a bloody handcuff clamped onto one of her wrists. It clanked with a dreadful finality every time she shifted her weight, a sickening addition to the already macabre soundtrack of sounds that filled the scene. Her body told a story of pure torment. She was covered in awful, deep scratches, ragged lines that looked sickeningly self-inflicted. One of her eyes, a testament to unimaginable strain and rage, she had popped a blood vessel, turning the entire eye an angry, pulsing red. Her clothes hung in torn, shredded rags, and her skin was so unnaturally pale that the officers later described her as looking less like a living human and more like a corpse. The bathroom door itself was telling pretty much the same story. There had obviously been a huge struggle. It was dented and scratched to hell as if a wild animal had attacked it. There were great raw gouges in the wood where her fingernails, or something far worse, had desperately dug in, trying to reach her brother on the other side. The moment her bloodshot eye landed on the officers, a horrifying, unearthly scream tore from her throat, and it was not human. It was the sound of something primal, enraged, and it aimed squarely at them. In a flash of terror, the woman launched herself towards them, a gaunt, frenzied blur of limbs and fury, attempting to claw and bite her way through the four burly men who had just busted through the door. Despite their numbers and their sheer physical advantage, these officers had a fight on their hands. She was an absolute whirlwind of violence, scratching and biting ferociously, struggling with an almost impossible strength, shrieking a guttural, constant wail the entire time. Even these four full-grown men had to use their full strength to keep this frail woman restrained. It was less like subduing a person and more like wrestling a possessed animal. But eventually, through sheer force of will and a lot of training, they managed to get her under control. They got her out of the house and, presumably, into a transport. I can only assume she had to have been sedated in some form. She doesn't seem like, how would you even get her to the car? I would think she would have to be sedated somehow. She was taken directly to a psychiatric ward, a place where, according to records, she reportedly remains to this very day. Once the immediate threat was neutralized, the officers finally managed to coax the brother out of the bathroom. He emerged looking utterly traumatized, and the sight of him only deepened the horror of the whole situation. His chest was a raw, bloody mess of scratches, a grotesque display of where his sister had, with terrifying literalism, literally tried to dig his heart right out of his chest with her bare hands, like it was a Jackson Pollock of violence, just like he had said on the phone call. He was not exaggerating when he said, "She's trying to tear my heart out." For many of the officers involved that night, men who'd seen the absolute worst of humanity, this incident was a profound turning point. More than a few of them, according to whispered accounts, found their own ways to religion in the chilling aftermath, forever changed by what they witnessed on that frozen, unholy Christmas Eve. So yes. Here's my thing with this. Clearly, yes, it sounds like from what we know from that story, clearly sounds like a possession, but
could have been meth.
Well, that's the other point, is, we've covered a lot of possession stories, and the other thing we have to look out for is, hopefully her brother was an innocent person and didn't, just the whole idea of someone being restrained. Now, if it's to that point, you should already be calling that he would feel the need to handcuff her. Tells me it's already at a place where she needs that help. And so when I was doing the notes, doing the research, I just got a little weary of the idea of like someone tying her down, because so many times in the stories we've covered of possessions, when priests or whomever try to like restrain someone, a lot of times they can end up dying, you know?
Right. They can hurt themselves trying to break the restraints because they will just fight no matter what, whether they can get out of the restraints or not.
Exactly. And so just taking this, though, at face value, so like that was just, I have no proof of that at all, obviously, but just taking this at face value, I mean, when the police themselves can actually hear what the dispatcher's hearing, and then literally they see the physical evidence of this guy, literally this thing tried to carve his heart out, like absolutely horrifying. And of all nights, like think about that. You've got these police that are probably already a little bummed, you know, that it's like, God, I wish I could be home. But then, you know, to go into that, it's like, just say you're one of those cops, like, imagine opening presents the next morning with your family.
Right.
just trying to sit there and act normal after what you saw the night before, like trying to
I couldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the idea the next morning of trying to of like of like
last night
everybody
you saw a demon. Today we're celebrating the birth of Jesus and having presents.
And like I just imagine them doing like one of those corny, like where like the whole family has the same matching pajamas. It's like their Christmas, and he just looks like death.
He's
and there's
still
all
wearing
sitting
his
there
uniform. He slept in his uniform.
Right. He's like still clutching his gun.
Yeah. He's just got the 1,000-yard stare. They're all
they're just dead inside. But folks, we're not going to lose any momentum here. Let's take it into story 2. And this one is called simply The Scream. All right, folks, let's head on out west. Let's get on our ponies and gallop out west, deep into a place where the darkness isn't just a lack of light, but can sometimes feel like an oppressive, all-consuming void. We're talking about rural Wyoming. And I'll tell you, it ain't like other country across this nation. Out there, you don't just have a few miles between neighbors, no sir. You've got houses often 50, sometimes even 100 miles away from the nearest flicker of civilization. Swallowed whole by the vast, indifferent plains and the ancient, whispering forests. Places where the only company you keep is the wind and whatever else might be out there with you. So on one particular night, around 11 p.m., a police officer and his partner got the call. A house buried deep in that kind of countryside. Well, they were reporting some suspicious activity. Now, when a call comes from that far out, suspicious activity is a pretty wide open term. It could mean anything from a car stuck in the ditch to something even far less mundane. A rogue tumbleweed, sometimes even the occasional UFO sighting. Stranger things have happened out there. Not knowing if it's just a wild goose chase or something far worse, the two officers pointed their cruiser towards the darkness and drove into something they had no idea was waiting for them. After what must have felt like an eternity of driving through the inky dark night, the officers finally pulled up to the isolated homestead. The family living there clearly was on edge, and they wasted no time telling the officers why they'd called. They'd been hearing a peculiar scream echoing from the direction of the creek near the property. A sound that they claimed was anything but normal. The officers, likely a bit skeptical, but nevertheless bound by duty to at least have a look, decided to wait it out on the porch with the family. And sure enough, after a tense, silent moment, a sound cut through the vast emptiness of the Wyoming night. It was a scream, a distant one, a few hundred yards away or so, swallowed partially by the darkness. Oh, but it was there. And it was certainly a scream. And it was not the kind of scream that you would expect. It was an incredibly strange sound, one that grated on your nerves. It sounded like a woman in distress, yes, but somehow higher pitched, almost unnaturally so. Each wail lasted a good 10 to 15 seconds. A drawn out, chilling cry that repeated itself every few minutes, cutting through the vast silence of the Wyoming night.
Every few minutes, too. Not even like every few seconds. This was like going on for a long time and spread out. Like, what would cause that?
And it almost said, like, when I hear him describe it as lasting, it comes every few minutes and it lasts for 10 to 15 seconds, which, when you think about it, that's a long scream. It almost sounds like a siren. It makes me think of like a siren, like if a tornado warning comes, you know what I mean? It's like, because they say it's like an unnaturally high-pitched wailing sound. It almost has like a siren sound to me. And I don't mean siren like the beautiful ladies that lure you to your death in a body of water, but like a literal siren. Now, these weren't greenhorn officers fresh out of the academy. Both were experienced outdoorsmen, men who knew the sounds of the wild, who could identify a coyote's howl from a bobcat's shriek in their sleep. And they were obviously sure of one thing. No animal native to that area, nor anything else they could possibly conceive of, was making that sound. With a shared uneasy glance, they instructed the family to stay locked inside their home. Then, summoning what courage they could to dilute the growing sense of dread, they headed out into the pitch-black night, towards the source of that unholy sound deep in the Wyoming wilderness. They plunged into the night, heading towards that peculiar, high-pitched wail. The thick pine woods swallowed their meager beams of illumination from their flashlights, turning the familiar forest into a disorienting labyrinth of dancing shadows. Every tree trunk became a lurking figure, every rustle of leaves a phantom presence. It was the kind of environment where your own mind starts to play tricks on you, conjuring disturbing shapes at the corners of your eyes. And as the officers pushed deeper, the lead cop's mind was racing, trying to logically process the impossible sound. In his estimation, there were only two possibilities for what they were hearing. Option A, some kind of an animal sound they had just never encountered before. Plausible, but he thought, frankly, highly unlikely given their extensive experience in the wilderness. Or there's option B, one that's far more unsettling. A woman truly in distress, being murdered, perhaps, or mutilated in the creek bed. Equally unlikely, maybe, for a rational mind, but in the growing grip of that chilling scream, it felt more serious than ever. And they pushed on, the unsettling, high-pitched wail echoing through the pines. They heard it twice more as they navigated the dark, uneven terrain. But then, as they reached a small, muddy stream that snaked its way through the larger creek bed, the screaming abruptly stopped. Just like that. The sudden silence was almost as unnerving as the screams themselves. Hoping against hope that whoever or whatever was making that unholy noise was still alive, the officers began to shout into the darkness. They called out, trying to assure anyone who could hear them to just come forward, come to their voice, that it was okay, that it was safe. But the only response they received was the gentle murmur of the water and the melancholy sigh of the wind rustling through the towering pines. They waited. 10 long, silent minutes ticked by and nothing. Not another sound. Finally, resigned, they figured it must be an animal after all, something they had simply scared away. A perfectly rational conclusion for a regular night. But just as that perfectly rational, utterly boring explanation began to settle in, that's when shit hit the fan. The scream came again, but this time it didn't come from the creek bed ahead. No, mama. This time it came from the direction they had just come from, echoing from the small patch of woods that they'd painstakingly pushed through only minutes before. Any notion of this being some scared animal vanished like smoke in the wind. Oh, brother, they spun around, flashlights frantically cutting through the darkness, and they began heading back the way they came, a cold knot of dread tightening in their stomachs. They were only about halfway back to the house, their pace quickening, when the scream erupted again. But this time, there was no mistaking its origin. It was now right beside them. By that point, any pretense of routine or protocol was completely gone. The officers were operating on pure instinct, a deep-seated sense of trepidation now firmly in control. They whipped their lights around frantically, their beams cutting through the oppressive darkness, desperate to catch a glimpse of who, or more accurately, what was making that chilling sound. But there was nothing. No eyes shining back from the gloom, no telltale rustling in the bushes, no fleeting glimpse of something darting away. Just the same impenetrable silence and the darkness that had surrounded them since they left the house. Then, with a sudden gut-wrenching force, the scream came again. This time it was unmistakably from the direction of the creek once more, as if whatever it was had simply teleported back. And this time, it was more intense than before. It lasted longer, more drawn out, a piercing shriek that was louder than ever, leaving their ears ringing painfully. The lead officer in his official report would later describe it as sounding almost malignant. It wasn't just a cry of distress or an animal call, but a deliberate hostile warning, as though it actively wanted them to leave. At that point, logic, bravery, and protocol took a back seat to pure, unadulterated primal fear, baby. Two officers, seasoned and stoic as they might be, felt the hair literally rise on their arms and necks. Whatever this thing was, that final malignant scream, the one that seemed to burn a hole through the very air, convinced them beyond the shadow of a doubt they absolutely did not want to find out what was making that noise. So they retreated, not just walking, but practically bolting back to the house. When they got there, they gave the family the bare minimum of instructions. Call again if you hear anything else. A phrase that sounded almost laughable, given the raw terror in their own eyes. Then they were out of that place as quickly as humanly possible, scrambling into their patrol car and peeling away from that cursed property. The lead officer, reflecting on the incident much later, would consistently bring up one chilling detail: the utter unnatural silence of the area. He talked about how incredibly unusual it was, especially during Wyoming summer. In wet areas like that, like the creek, you'd normally expect a constant cacophony of insects buzzing and frogs making a racket. But during the entire time the officers were out there searching, enveloped in that impossible presence, it had been as silent as the grave. So now, this tale makes me think of, like, La Llorona. It's this sort of banshee-like almost specter. Now, we don't get a follow-up, because typically a banshee would imply that something typically means either the person that hears it, or either they are going to die or someone close to them is going to die soon, which obviously we don't have any follow-up to know that. But to me, this almost sounds like that, like some sort of a banshee, or definitely a protective spirit, because if it wanted them, it would have kept chasing them. So it's definitely something attached to that area, something that it's either guarding or it simply can't leave. Because it's also possible that the scream was like, "Take me with you," but I can't leave. I mean, honestly, for all we know. So it's obviously something that either chooses not to leave or cannot leave that creek bed, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that they heard it coming from one direction, they go all the way there, then they hear it coming back from the direction they came from, they go back, they hear it really close, and then they hear it back in the original spot by the creek again. There was two of them, and they both have flashlights, and they can't see anything. They don't see anything, but they hear the voice, and especially at that moment when they heard the voice really close, you'd think if there was something, they would have been able to see the source then.
Absolutely.
And they described the voice as teleporting almost. That it just kind of goes immediately from one direction to another, seemingly impossibly. So that's an interesting one. I've never heard of anything like that before, but I can't imagine what else it might be.
Right. And my first impression when I was going over the notes and everything is when it first pops up behind them, when they keep following it to the creek bed and then it's behind them, it gives you this feeling of like, almost like, oh shit, it trapped, like it lured them, you know? But seeing how it plays out, yeah, I think it's something that didn't want them there, either because it was protecting something or whatever. Or, like I said, for all we know, it may be something that was saying, take me with you. I want to get out of here. And then it tries to leave and then it just teleports right back to, the creek bed.
Could have been a cry of anguish.
Exactly, right. That absolutely. We don't really know what the cry implies. I think we can safely say that for some reason it's attached to that area and either will not or cannot leave. Ooh, just had to take a quick pause there, Creep Street, just to give your poor palpitating heart a rest. If you're enjoying this episode, go ahead and follow us on Facebook, Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod, TikTok at Creep Street Podcast. That's right. And if once a week is not enough for you, just head on over to patreon.com for all sorts of goodies. We got 3 different tiers there, something for every tier. So get your fixins. We even got a free tier where you can listen to the weekly sketches before they go live on the episode. Now, without further ado, back to today's story. Ooh, boy, oh boy, I saved, you know me. You know me. My old damn trick, saving the best for last. And that's exactly what we got here. This one really got me. This one, when I was going over different stories, I was like, oh, I gotta share this one. Because this is too much, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and gals, buckle up, buckle in tight, strap in. Because this next tale is called The Gray Man. Now, usually when we talk about paranormal activity, for sure, yeah, it's creepy and occasionally terrifying enough to make your hair stand on end, but sometimes, in dire situations, it can actually result in people being actively, physically harmed. Even your garden variety poltergeists, who often prefer to do their dirty work by throwing around crockery or stacking chairs when nobody's actually home to witness the spectacle. However, that was most certainly not the case in Santa Maria, California, back in the mid-'80s. After a series of unsettling reports detailing strange sightings and outright disturbing incidents out in the sleepy countryside, folks quickly learned that whatever was stirring wasn't content with just moving a few knickknacks around. Oh, no. Out in that quiet Santa Maria countryside, the whispers began to circulate. Folks started reporting the same unsettling sight. A tall, shadowy man lurking just outside their homes. Not just once, maybe not even twice, but enough times that it started to feel like a pattern. And to add a little more dread to the mix, a couple of those very homes had recently been broken into. Now, is that a coincidence? I don't know, it could be, but we'll find out. It doesn't really seem like this gray man is very much interested in our earthly possessions, shall we say. These scattered reports simmered for a while, a low, unsettling hum beneath the surface of everyday life, until one freezing night when things boiled over, a local homeowner, known around town for enjoying his liquor a little too much, well, he called the police. He was frantic, absolutely terrified, practically screaming into the phone that there was a 7-foot-tall, gray-haired man standing right outside his door, trying to get in. Now, given the caller's reputation for always being on the sauce, the operator probably took it with a grain or two of salt. Probably just another late-night delusion fueled by too much hooch. But rules are rules, and a call is a call, so a patrol car was dispatched as is protocol. Just a routine check to see if the old drunk and disorderly is doing okay. And oh baby, there's a lot that was not okay on this night. The dispatcher, despite her initial skepticism, stayed on the line with the agitated caller, trying to glean more information, but the man's fear was rapidly escalating. He wasn't just claiming that the gray man was outside, he was now convinced that the entity was actively watching him through his window, its unseen gaze burning holes through the glass. Not only that, the distressed man said that the stranger wanted to hurt him. A knot of concern tightened in the operator's stomach. She pressed him further for a description, hoping to get something, anything concrete for the responding officers. But the poor soul was already gripped with terror. All he could articulate was that the figure was tall and thin, with a disproportionately large head and huge black eyes. Not exactly your typical neighborhood watch description. Not the type of guy who stops by to borrow a cup of sugar. Thinking fast when realizing this wasn't just another drunk dial, the operator immediately instructed the frantic caller to lock himself in a room until the responding officers could arrive. A classic move for containing a chaotic situation, and usually a sensible one. But as the operator was giving these instructions, a new horrifying element bled through the phone line. It was a loud, insistent buzzing noise. It started subtly, then rapidly grew louder, rising in volume until it was piercing, a piercing, unbearable whine. Then, the man on the other end of the line let out a terrified, guttural scream, and the line went dead, cut off, and all was silent. The operator didn't waste a second. She immediately radioed the officers who were already en route, the chill of that scream still echoing in her ears. And her message was stark. She told the officers to expect violence on the scene. This wasn't a public intoxication call anymore. This was something else entirely. So the patrol car carrying 2 officers, a male and female, pulled up to the address a short while later. The house was an old 2-story wooden structure, its whitewashed exterior peeling like sunburnt skin under the harsh California sun. The front yard was nothing but a dried-out patch of forgotten earth, adding to the general air of neglect. They scanned the property. There was no one outside, no shadowy figure lurking in the brittle bushes. Not a single sign that anyone, let alone a 7-foot-tall gray man, had been hanging around. The quiet was almost unsettling, though, as the frantic scream they'd just heard over the radio played back in their minds. As they approached the seemingly silent house, the illusion of calm was shattered. From just inside the door, the officers could now clearly hear the caller, and he was screaming. An animalistic sound that would curdle your blood and clench your cheeks. They shouted towards the door, identifying themselves as the police, announcing their entry. They tried the handle, expecting to simply walk in and deal with the distressed individual, but the door didn't budge. It was completely jammed, as if something enormous, something immovable, was pressed against it from the other side. In their report, they made a chilling note. The door was not locked. It was being held shut by something unseen, an immense force, as if there was someone big on the other side of the door pressing against it to keep them out, which would imply there was probably every time they shoved a little bit of give and it would close again. Yet there's no one they can see standing on the other side of that door. Then, with an almost sickening familiarity, it started again. A loud buzzing noise, exactly like the one that had cut off the phone call earlier. The noise erupted from inside the house and it grew louder, rapidly escalating into a deafening roar, a sound that vibrated through the very foundation of the old home. And with it, the man's screams escalated too, reaching an ear-splitting, desperate crescendo that was truly horrific to hear. The officers knew with chilling certainty that they had to get inside. Whether they were equipped for what was in that house or not was irrelevant. Someone's life was clearly in danger, and they needed to get inside. They both took turns kicking at the door, throwing their full weight against the aged wood. But to their astonishment, they were rebounding off of it as if it were reinforced steel, even though it was clearly just a standard old wooden door. It was as though someone invisible, some immense pressure was holding it shut still as the man inside bellowed and wailed. Finally, after a struggle that must have felt like an eternity, they managed to break the door down. And the moment the door gave way, collapsing inward, the buzzing abruptly halted, and with it the man's screams ceased. The silence after such a violent cacophony was truly unsettling. They stepped inside, their weapons drawn, their eyes immediately falling upon the scene that would forever be seared into their minds. The man they had heard screaming wasn't there. What they found instead was blood. It was splashed liberally on the polished wooden floors, stark against the faded wallpaper, and even smeared across the walls. And amidst this crimson chaos were strange, bloody footprints, unlike anything either officer had ever seen before. With their guns now firmly aimed, the two officers moved with agonizing caution, clearing each corner, checking every room. The air was thick with the metallic tang of freshly spilled blood and an unspoken dread. As they reached the staircase, a new sound cut through the oppressive silence. Something was moving about upstairs. And then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of someone trying to yell. A desperate but muffled cry, as if someone or something was pressing a hand firmly over someone's mouth. Guns held steady, a cold dread seeping into their bones, the officers carefully ascended the staircase. Each creaking step on the old wood intensified the suspense. Reaching the upper landing, their flashlights cut through the gloom, revealing a fresh wave of horror. More bloody footprints, larger than any human's track, mixed with a sickening blood trail that snaked across the floor. Evidence that someone had been dragged. The trail led directly to a closed door, behind which the muffled cries were now undeniably clear. Taking a deep breath, the male officer cautiously reached for the doorknob. He pushed the door open to reveal the scene within. The homeowner, the frantic caller, was there. He was tied up and gagged, a crude blindfold pressed against his eyes, his body soaked in urine, His eyes, though, were what truly captured the officer's attention. They were bulging in sheer, unadulterated terror, locked onto something beyond the officer's view. Later in the officer's official report, a document usually devoid of emotion painted a chilling picture of the homeowner's state. The poor man was covered in cuts that were precise and deliberate, as if etched with a razor. But these weren't random acts of violence. The cuts surrounded his eyes and meticulously followed the lines of his organs and vitals, as though whomever or whatever had done this wanted to set these apart, these crucial areas of the body. It was a grotesque surgical mapping done with unfathomable malice. The man himself, once untied and ungagged, was a shattered wreck, as you might expect. He appeared nearly insane with fear, babbling incoherently, barely making any sense. His mind, it seemed, had buckled under the weight of whatever unspeakable horror he had endured in that room. The moment they ripped the gag from his mouth and freed his bound limbs, the homeowner utterly broke down. He didn't just cry, he erupted into a racking, uncontrollable sob, clinging to the officers, thanking them over and over again for saving his life. He claimed through his terror-stricken gasps that the gray man wanted to take him away. Later, when the investigators pored over the scene, a grim reality settled in. Despite the man having been in that room, held captive and subjected to unimaginable horror for at least 4 hours, there was no sign of forced entry anywhere in the house. There was no broken windows. No locks had been messed with. Not a single identifiable fingerprint was found, and no trace evidence, no other sign that anyone else had ever been inside that old wooden home other than the owner himself. The only thing they did find, the only tangible evidence left behind, were those strange, bloody footprints. Footprints that were too big to match any known human and could not be identified by any forensic team. But the bizarre elements of this case didn't stop with the lack of evidence or the unsettling footprints. The victim himself, once he was able to coherently speak through his terror, added another perplexing layer to the incident. He insisted he had called the police 5 hours before the officers finally showed up to his doorstep, and that the operator had at the time informed him that the patrol was indeed on the way. Now, the responding officers, for their part, reported that it only took them about 30 minutes to reach the house from their previous destination. And once they were on the scene, it took them roughly 10 minutes to breach the door and locate the man. So do the math, because it seems whatever happened, it messed with time as a side effect. Somehow, between the initial desperate call and the discovery of the traumatized homeowner, over 4 hours of time vanished. Gone, just lost to that dreadful night, swallowed by whatever unseen force had been at play in that old house. The grim coda of this chilling tale arrived a few years later. The man, the poor victim of that horrifying encounter, unable to escape the psychological scars, would tragically take his own life. He left behind a note, a final desperate testament to his torment, describing how they, quote, wouldn't leave him alone. In that same note, a final chilling warning was penned, directed squarely at the very officers who had rescued him that night, saying, quote, they were after them too. Yet despite this final act of despair and warning, he also hauntingly thanked them for rescuing him that night. And as for those officers, the memory of that night and the chilling message left behind has never faded. They've since reported a persistent, unnerving sensation, a feeling of being watched, a prickling on the back of their necks, a fleeting shadow in their periphery. This feeling, they say, is especially potent on the darkest of nights, when the world itself seems to hold its breath, and the line between reality and the inexplicable blurs. Ooh, baby, baby, baby. Did I tell you? Did I not tell you? I saved the best for last, because those last few little bits, it was already weird enough. Already you had the poor guy tied up, obviously being tortured, but there being no sign of entry, of forced entry, but still those footprints. So somehow it was in there. But then, oh my gosh, classic Creep Street, you throw in that whole ingredient of missing time. It almost reminds me, I think I saw the first movie years ago. I don't know, they were never my thing, but it almost reminds me of like Hellraiser or something. Almost like the thing took him to a different time and space or whatever, so it could do its thing. Oh man, like it was already weird enough, but then that ingredient of the missing time is just, and obviously the ultimate tragedy that the man took his own life a few years later, but it seems like these police officers, whatever it is, maybe has attached itself to them. But I also think that maybe having this experience just made them more maybe aware. So maybe those things they're seeing were things that were always there. They just,
weren't sensitive to it.
Right, and this event made them, sensitive to that sort of thing. Or maybe it's something that attached to, who knows. But for me, the biggest thing is the time thing. And this time thing, here it is. It pops up in all these weird, sometimes in hauntings, a lot of times in UFO stories. And here's the other thing, they call him a gray man, and it seems like as though he's human-like, even though he's really tall, he's got the gray hair, but then they talk about big black eyes. It almost makes me think of like a gray alien in a way, like maybe something that's trying to look human. This was by far the story that grabbed my attention the most.
One thing that occurred to me, in that situation, 30 minutes waiting for the officers might feel like a long time, but you wouldn't think he would actually have thought it was 5 hours. That just seems like he wouldn't be convinced that it had been that long. But also, did they not see anything when they finally got the door open? That whatever was blocking the door just wasn't even there?
Right, they got in and all they saw was the blood, was the footprints and the blood that was smeared everywhere, but they saw no sign of like a person. There was nothing, no like furniture that was braced up against the door. That's the other thing, is it's like if a person lays against a door to keep something out and you can ram it and like, it gives a little bit, but it'll go back. That's almost what it sounded like, as if it was like a person they couldn't see leaning up against the door trying to keep them out.
Yeah, which is especially considering they found nobody else except for the man inside. No forced entry. How would this thing have gotten away?
Right. And consider this. The guy was screaming while they were trying to get in. So was that buzzing noise. So it implies that this thing was simultaneously able to torture that guy and hold the door shut. So it implies either there's two of these things, or this thing is capable of essentially, it's supernatural already, but
it has that kind of ability to be able to do multiple things at once in different locations. So yeah, that is really weird.
Right, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, Gage. I got a list of names who are wanted by the CSPD, the Creep Street Police Department.
Oh yeah? Who's that?
The list of our top-tier Patreon subscribers. Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face Via Lundqvist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the Oh-So-Suave Sean Richardson, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, Maggie, the killer stud, Carl Staub, the fire starter, Heather Carter, the conqueror, Christopher Damian Damaris, the awfully awesome Annie, the murderous Maggie Leach, the serve sexy Sam Hackworth, the evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the maniacal Laura Maynard, the vicious Karen Van Vieren, the arch nemesis Aaron Bird, the sadistic Sergio Castillo, the rapscallion Ryan Crum, the beast Benjamin Huang, the devilish Chris Doucette, the psycho Sam, the electric Emily Zhang, the ghoulish Gert Hankum, the renegade Corey Ramos, the crazed Carlos, the antagonist Andrew Park, the monstrous Michaela Schur, the witchy wonder J.P. Weimer, the freaky Ben Forsyth, the barbaric Andrew Barry, the mysterious Marcella, the hellacious Cale Hoffman, and Pugblorb, the poltergeist. That's right, folks. That's right. Head on over to patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast for all sorts of goodies. We got a little something for everybody over there. Please check it out. Folks, once again, we thank you and we love you. So happy to be able to make this show for you guys every week. It's a joy to do, and we love interacting with you guys. Please send us messages, reach out if you have questions or episode suggestions, or, like you're curious about a certain topic we covered and you're like, oh, but what happened then? If you just want to talk about it, let us know, reach out. But our DMs are always open here on Creep Street. All right, folks, citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Gage Hurley.
Good night and goodbye.